For me, that was like being amongst gods. These people were the people I dreamt of meeting. The crowd during that championship had helped bring me back to life, and they brought me back, and I'll never, ever forget them for it.
Well, Shaun, thank you for speaking to us. We're going to take a look back at your storied Crucible career, which I suppose all started back in 2002, where you faced one of the greatest players of all time on the sport's biggest stage. What was going through your mind heading into that match?
I mean, I was very, very nervous, of course. But I'd won 5 matches to get there. Didn't want to embarrass myself. I was one of the youngest to ever make it that far, and kind of know that all the pressure's on Stephen, and he's expected to win, and of course he did win. But I think I was just excited to enjoy the moment. You're aware of all these cliches. You want to enjoy the day, and you don't want to embarrass yourself. It was a very difficult baptism of fire, playing the greatest player of all time at that point on his home patch. But something I look back at very, very fondly, and would have much rather that experience than a gentle introduction to World Championship life.
Everyone always talks almost about the claustrophobia of the Crucible, and especially on the 2-table setup where the crowd are literally almost kind of involved in the shot. What was it like when you stepped out into the arena and kind of realised just what it was like out there?
I'd been a few times as a child, and of course my friend John, who came with me on that particular visit, was keen to get in the arena first. Could you get in there and have a sit in your chair? But of course the place is empty, and when you walk out there, you just don't realise how claustrophobic it is. It seemed to change so much from my first visit as a 9-year-old, where any room seems big. Fast forward to 10 years and I was there again, and it just seemed completely different. Incredible that the people on the front, they could almost reach out and touch the player's cueing arm, an incredible setup, almost unlike any other sporting environment but there's just nowhere better to play snooker. The iconic, the amount of iconic matches and iconic things that have happened there, certainly wasn't lost on me. And I suppose maybe it was probably all too much for me in the end.
And as you say, a baptism of fire playing Stephen Hendry in your first match, but how much do you think that did set you up going forward, having had that experience?
I mean, I learned so much in that match. I learnt more in that match against him there than I learnt in 20 matches against other players elsewhere. To play him there, to watch how he went about it, to watch how he interacted with the audience, just how he played certain shots up close. This was the greatest player of that generation, and I had the best seat in the room for that best of 19. Watching, I learnt so much from him, just the way he was backstage, some do's and don'ts. He wasn't sat in the players' lounge talking, playing cards. He was there. It was work. He came in, he played, he left. And learnt a lot from Stephen. Even without him knowing that he was giving me that information, I learnt a lot about the do's and don'ts of professional life right there and then.
Fast forward to 2005, a huge moment in your career, but going into that event, did you turn up at the Crucible sort of believing that you could or would win it? You were a big outsider, but did
Absolutely not. No, I mean, of course not. I didn't think I was going to win it. I'd never won a match there. I'd been there twice before, hadn't won a game. So I had, little goal was to win a match, to get to walk out there and compete and leave the auditorium as a winner, make the second round. I'd never played a best of 25 in my life. So that was a target. And my old coach, Steve Prest, who sadly passed away, he and I had a little target in mind. We knew if I could get to the semi-finals, I'd earn enough ranking points to break into the next batch of 16 on the rankings. The rankings were 16, 32s, your 48s, your 64s. And I think if I got to the semis, I could have got in the top 48 or something like that. And that was just a very distant target. Of course, I did win my first match. And then I played my absolute nemesis. Every single time I reached a personal best of an event, I ran into John Higgins, and he dealt with me swiftly. And there was nothing there to suggest that he wasn't just going to handle me with ease and pass me by and get to the quarterfinals. But for some reason, for that few days, I had the beating of one of the best of all time. And once I got to the quarters, I started to think, what if? maybe something strange is happening here.
And then you did get to that semi-final and you beat Peter Ebdon, and heading into that game with Matthew Stevens, what was it like overnight? Was it sort of turmoil, sort of nerves, excitement? What was it like heading into that?
It was the ultimate mix of excitement and nervousness. It was tough to get a good night's sleep. Of course, everyone mobs you for tickets. People who you haven't heard of for 10 years, they come out of the woodwork. You have a small allocation of tickets from the tour that rise as you progress through an event. Suddenly we're asking if we can buy more tickets. We've got no money to buy these tickets with, but the money is coming because you're winning the matches, and it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you've gone from an allocation of 6 to now I've got 60, and you're giving them out to the man in the takeaway and the man who helped you out when you were a kid and this, that and the other, and suddenly you turn what is an iconic event almost into a home tie. And I was living in Rotherham at the time, and when I walked out there, it was like one of their own was walking out to play Matthew. I really did have the home support, even though I'm not from South Yorkshire. You would have thought I was. And it was an incredible few days of, come on Shaun and come on this, and the support I had. In fact, the morning we turned up of the final, I think was the same morning as the Sheffield half marathon. And Steve and I turned up backstage at the stage door to practice. And we couldn't get in the venue. We couldn't cross the road for the runners. And every single one of them ran past shouting, come on Shaun, do it for Yorkshire, do it for Sheffield. And again, I'm not from that part of the world, but because I lived there at that time, I had so much support. And to some degree, they were the 12th man.
And it was a real battle over those 2 days, but it all came down to just the final moments and the crux of the match at 16 all, and you made 2 brilliant breaks to get over the line. In those moments, what was it like? Is it a bit of a blur, or have you got clarity in your mind of how those moments panned out?
I remember the last 2 frames very, very clearly. I don't remember much of the match at all to that point. I remember being far too nervous to hold the cue to start with. I remember there was a big turning point in the 3rd session where Matthew was streaking ahead. He chose to play a shot left-handed rather than use the rest, and that did turn the game, there's no question. And then, of course, in the evening session, the final session, it was the final embassy. They had all the past winners there for the procession, and that, for me, that was like being amongst gods. That these people were the people I dreamt of meeting, not competing in front of. And so to be there and share the stage with them was almost a step too far for me. I found that very, very difficult to handle. But I just managed to hold on to my composure long enough to get to that stage. And then in the last couple of frames, I think I won the penultimate frame with 1 visit. And I remember as the referee, Arian Williams, was re-racking the balls for the start of what turned out to be the last frame. A voice in my head said, you better win this match here, because if it goes to a deciding frame, I don't think I can handle this. And of course, Matthew was in first, he missed, and I did step in with a match and frame winning break.
64. To leave Matthew needing a snooker. Incredible.
And what was it like after that? I suppose all of a sudden you've gone from being a rank outsider and qualifier to being the centre of the snooker world, and all the attention on you. How was the evening after that? How were the months that followed, and the attention that came with it?
No, it was crazy, completely unprepared for it. There are books in every bookshop and online of how to cope with failure. There aren't many books out there to teach you how to cope with success. And I found that very, very difficult to adjust to, going to the local shop, being recognised at the petrol station, filling the car up, being asked for an autograph, not being able to do simple things like go out for dinners and meals without being, asked for all these things, which is perfectly normal. That's what happens when people. There's no problem with that. But it was a real jump into the deep end. I wasn't ready for it at all, despite having gone through the Young Players of Distinction scheme with World Snooker as a 19-year-old. Despite all that teaching and education I had on that stuff, I just wasn't ready for it. And you know, I look back at some of the things I said at the time. I cringe. You know, I look back and go, oh, don't say that and don't do this. But you know, the ignorance of youth. You know, I really didn't know some of the things I was saying. I regret a lot of those things. But you know, it was all new to me. And you know, at 22, I was really just a kid, like, you know.
I suppose is that the sort of thing, sport has come a long way since then. It's maybe the sort of thing that you would be a little bit more helped along in this modern environment. Maybe back in 2005, those pressures and things weren't really thought about.
No, and of course I had no management at the time. Didn't have an agent. I didn't have a manager. Didn't have a social media content advisor. Didn't have any of those things. And so, you know, got all of those things wrong. You know, I got them all wrong. And you know, was getting involved in everything. I went to every golf day I was invited to. I went to every charity event I was asked to attend. I did every extracurricular activity I was asked to do. I did. Because that was the advice I received from people whose advice I thought I would take. My performances on the table dipped. I didn't capitalise on the success and that crest of a wave, which you would seek to do now. That would be the advice now. I was working under the old advice of, you know, players in past years who were like, you know, attend every function, go to every dinner, do all these things, shake every hand, cut every ribbon, and that's what you do as world champion. Completely unprepared for what came along with lifting that famous trophy. You know, it's looking back, it wasn't a complete shock, I suppose.
4 years later, you did get back to the final. You faced John Higgins, and I suppose it ended up being quite one-sided in the end. Do you look back and think you maybe didn't play your best, or were you just up against one of the greatest of all time who put on a masterclass?
I mean, I was much more suited to what happens, you know, with being on TV and stuff, all that other extracurricular stuff. I knew what to do with that. I'd won other tournaments in those intervening years. I played the best snooker of the 2009 World Championship. I think that was clear. You know, even taking into account I think I was the best player of that fortnight. I just didn't win it, and because of my style of play was far too open. I was far too open and aggressive, and Higgins just picked me off. You know, looking back, you know, I had no safety game, I had no B game, no C game. If I couldn't blow him off the table, I couldn't win. And I didn't play well in the final, and I didn't win. But it was one that I look back on. I'd love to be able to get in my time machine. That's one of the matches I'd love to be able to revisit and just have a real quiet, or maybe not such a quiet word in my ear, and just say, just calm it down a bit, just mix it with him in the safety, and you might get a bit closer.
It was a completely different sort of match in 2015 against Stuart Bingham in the final. But I think we spoke a couple of years ago, and you said it was a match that actually nearly didn't happen. It was one of the best finals in recent memory, but you were struggling on the morning of that.
Got up the morning of it, and I couldn't turn my head to the left like this. I certainly couldn't tilt my neck like that, and you know, get down to play a shot and then lift my neck up like, you know, I couldn't take the position. And rather than practice on the morning before the final, Chris Henry was stood on my back, trying to get into my muscle and release the nerve. Now, it's a problem I've had. I had it slightly before then, and I've had it ever since. And it's, you know, it's cost me matches since then. There's no question about that. It didn't cost me the final. I would like to make that clear. It did not cost me the 2015 final. Stuart Bingham, who played snooker from the gods, cost me the final of 2015. He was completely unplayable. Who did he beat? Robbie Williams, Graham Dott, Ronnie O'Sullivan, Judd Trump, and myself to lift that famous trophy. Nobody could take that away from Stuart. He fully deserved it. You know, I look back on that quite fondly because it was one of the highest standard finals ever seen. It was an incredible match to be involved with, and he fully deserved to walk away as champion.
Was it easy then to be philosophical after the match with how good it was? You'd obviously had the two experiences in the world final before where you'd won it and then lost heavily. What was it like losing in such a classic that you just didn't quite get on the right side of?
I'm not sure that how you lose affects how easy losing is to deal with, to be honest with you. I always thought that as a younger player. I thought if you play well and lose, that's easier to take. Actually, I think losing sucks. And whether you lose 10-9 on the black on a respot or you lose 10-0 and somebody pumps you, I don't think losing gets any easier to deal with. I think your perspective on it changes as you get older and you have kids and you see what real problems actually are. But no, I don't think losing snooker matches is dictated to by how you lose them. And I didn't leave the house for 2 weeks after losing to Stuart. You know, it was like I was grieving for somebody. It was horrific. You know, the morning after losing, I went to the local shop to stock the house up because we'd been away in Sheffield for 2 weeks. And the woman on the counter got all a fluster and she went, "Congratulations, last night we watched you, you did." And as she's saying, she realises that she's got the wrong person and she went, "I'm sorry, what am I saying? You lost." And I'm like, you know, this isn't the kind of morning, this isn't the pep talk or pep talk I want. You know, I just want to buy some bread. Leave me alone, you know. And it was bad. You know, for 2 weeks I was in a pretty dark place. But you know, you get back. The great thing with sport is there's another opportunity just around the corner, and you get back on the bike and you keep pedaling.
In the 2021 World Championship, it was a strange year because we were all coming back to the Crucible with the crowds and things. And the one thing I remember about your run actually was that you made a real effort to engage with the crowd. There was lots of fist pumping and things, and I was interested after that because there was some criticism in some courts about, oh yeah, that's not what's done in snooker. And I remember you were very strong saying that actually that is what we want to see, and that it was something that you made a point of kind of doing throughout that World Championship. It
was something that happened by complete fluke. And then I noticed that, you know, it had a real positive effect on me, and the most important people in snooker, the fans, loved it. They loved the interaction. Snooker's really weird. Players win a match, they walk off. If you went to the West End to watch a show, and the actors and actresses performed their show at the end, and the last number finished, the curtain came, and they walked off, it'd be really weird. That's what happens in every match in snooker. The players very rarely turn around and thank the crowd for their appreciation. They very rarely give anything back to the people who've paid their money to come and watch. And so I find that criticism really weird to take. I've never had that criticism from any member of the public. Anyone who's parted with their money to come and watch us put on a show has never criticised me for that. I've had a lot of criticism from players who've yet to have the successes that some have. No one who's won the World Championship has ever criticised me for doing those things, because they know exactly what it takes.
And you went on and got to the final. It was a brilliant final with Mark Selby. It was a sort of contrast of styles, I suppose. But when it came down at 17-15, you took on a difficult red, didn't get it. And it was weird because it was 17-15, but it almost felt like a decider. It felt like there was a lot riding on that frame. How gutting was that moment when it just didn't quite get it?
Completely. And of course, you know, I remember the shot, and it was, you know, should I have taken it on? The way I was reading the room, I'm reading him because he'd started to wobble. Although I was 2 frames behind, I'd been 4, and I'd won the 2 previous frames in one visit. He was struggling then. And so I played my shot based on how I was reading him. The atmosphere in the room had changed. I had 99% of the support in the room. You're on a crest of a wave, all of the rest of it. And so I was like, if this red goes in, I'm going to win the tournament. And so for me, it was like, right, get the rest out. Let's take a deep breath, pot this red. Because I didn't think there was any way he could win if I could win that frame. Of course, I missed the red. And had to sit down and watch him pot the last 8 balls to win the championship. And of course, once I've missed the red, I know he's going to clear up because he's a man of such great stature. He's got the bottle, he's got the technique. He won't make a mistake from there. And he didn't. But that was my moment, and I missed it.
I think the atmosphere of that final, we'll all remember it for a long time. We'd come back from lockdown. It was the first full house indoors in British sport since the lockdown. It summed up the Crucible for me. And how important do you think it is for us as a sport to have an iconic place like that? You know, you've got Wimbledon in tennis, St Andrews in golf, Lords in cricket, but how important is that for us to have the Crucible?
It's massively important. You know, that is our home. That's the home of snooker around the world. If you stop someone in Sydney and ask them where the home of snooker is, they will say the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield. It's massively important that we have that connection. And that event particularly was important because we led the way. It's important for snooker not to be forgotten in the history books as we look back at the pandemic and lockdown. Snooker led the way to live sport and the return of audiences, and it was great to be a part of that. It was great to be the first sport back to welcome full houses in, to have that interaction with other people again who want to watch you perform, and we were very special to be part of that. One of the things I look back on is at the end, I said something that I hadn't thought about how significant it was, but I said that the crowd during that championship had helped bring me back to life. And they really had. the pandemic was such a struggle for everybody, and I really found it tough. Certainly performing to empty rooms, to empty stadiums, wasn't what I signed up to be as a professional snooker player. And they brought me back, and I'll never, ever forget them for it.
And finally, looking ahead to this World Championship and World Championships going forward, obviously now it's been 18 years since your one win in the event, and there's been the near misses since. How much would it mean to you to win this year or again in your career, and how equipped do you feel you are to do that again?
Well, I think almost, to a point where winning a second world title would almost bookend my career. I've always held multiple world champions in a slightly different regard to single-time winners. I think there's a little asterisk next to those players who've won it more than once. I don't think anyone can fluke a world championship. You ask any of the players who've only won it once, they will tell you the same. It's incredibly difficult. I have been to 3 other finals. There aren't many players who've been to more finals than me. It's not a long list. And so to some degree I count myself in their company, despite only having my name on the trophy once. But if you offered me, if you took all my other championships away, including that one, and let me have it again, I'd probably turn it down, because I've got my name on the trophy and nobody can ever take that off me.
Well, the best of luck, and thanks for taking that trip down memory lane with us.
Thank you.
The winner will receive a cheque for £250,000, the championship trophy, a magnum of Champagne Victor, and the title, 2005 Embassy World Snooker Champion, Shaun Murphy.